"You're not my son, so you don't get to use my stuff," my stepdad declared. I was 14 when Mark first showed up. He rolled into our lives like a charming guest star in a sitcom, all smiles and easy laughs. He'd bring me candy bars, ask about school, and even helped with my math homework once. I thought, okay, maybe this guy's alright. But after he married my mom, it was like he flipped a switch. The candy bars stopped, and so did the smiles. Suddenly, I was living with a man who acted like I was an intruder in my own home. It started small. He'd get annoyed if I left a glass on the counter or forgot to turn off the living room light. Then it escalated. One night, I plopped onto the couch to watch TV and he snatched the remote from my hand. "This is for family," he said, his voice cold. I thought he was joking, but his face was dead serious. From then on, I wasn't allowed to touch the TV in the living room. If I wanted to watch something, I had to use the tiny, staticky set in my room that barely picked up 3 channels. Then came the computer ban. We had one desktop in the den, and I used it for school projects. One day, I was typing up an essay when Mark stormed in, unplugged the keyboard, and told me to get out. "You don't pay for the internet," he said. "You don't get to use it." I tried to explain it was for homework, but he just pointed to the door. After that, I had to beg teachers to let me stay after school to use the library computers. It was humiliating, lugging my backpack across town because I couldn't do my work at home. The kitchen was the worst. Mark decided I couldn't touch the fridge without asking first. Not even for a glass of water. He'd stand there, arms crossed, watching me like I was about to steal his precious leftovers. He started buying family food, fresh fruit, good bread, name-brand snacks, and then separate stuff for me. My shelf had stale cereal, off-brand peanut butter, and bread that was always a day from molding. Once, I grabbed an apple from the family stash because I was starving, and he grounded me for a week. "You don't get to take what's mine," he snapped. I started hiding granola bars in my backpack just to have something to eat. My mom saw it all, and I know it tore her up. She'd try to talk to him, but he'd shut her down fast. He'd say things like, "If you don't like how I run my house, you can leave." I could see the fear in her eyes. We didn't have anywhere else to go. She'd been out of work since I was little, and Mark paid the bills. So she'd quiet down, give me a sad look, and tell me to just follow his rules. It felt like she was choosing him over me, and that hurt worse than anything. Mark kept saying he was preparing me for the real world. He'd lecture me about earning my keep even though I was just a kid. But it wasn't about tough love. It was control. He put padlocks on the kitchen cabinets, the fridge, even the washing machine. I had to hand wash my clothes in the sink with dish soap because he said I didn't deserve to use his appliances. My jeans were always stiff and smelled weird, and kids at school started noticing. I stopped inviting friends over because I couldn't explain why we couldn't grab a snack or watch a movie. I'd make excuses about being busy, but the truth was I was ashamed. By 16, I was counting down the days until I could leave. I got a part-time job at a fast food place, flipping burgers after school. It was exhausting, but it meant I could buy my own food and save a little cash. Mark didn't like that I was earning money. He'd make snide comments about how I thought I was too good for his rules now. One time, I bought a cheap phone with my savings so I could text my friends without using the house phone. He found it and smashed it on the kitchen counter, saying I didn't need it because beggars don't get gadgets. I cried myself to sleep that night, picking up the pieces of my phone from the trash. The loneliness was crushing. I'd sit in my room, staring at the walls, wondering why Mark hated me so much. I started keeping a journal, scribbling down everything, the rules, the locks, the way he'd smirk when I asked for permission to eat. Writing it out helped me feel less crazy, like I wasn't imagining how bad things were. I hid the journal under a loose floorboard in my closet because I knew he'd tear it up if he found it. Then, when I was 17, everything changed. I was sneaking into the kitchen late at night to grab some water when I overheard Mark on the phone in the den. His voice was low, but I caught every word. "Yeah, she'll be gone soon," he said. "Then it'll just be me and Sarah. She'll have nowhere to go, no kids to worry about." My heart stopped. He wasn't talking about me, he was talking about my mom. I realized he wasn't just trying to push me out, he had a bigger plan. I crept back to my room, my hands shaking, and wrote it all down in my journal. I didn't know what he meant by no kids to worry about, but it scared me. Update 1. Figuring out what's going on. After overhearing Mark's phone call, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying his words, trying to make sense of them. Was he planning to leave my mom? Hurt her? Something worse? I felt sick every time I thought about it. I started paying closer attention to everything he did, like I was a detective in my own house. I noticed little things I'd missed before, how he'd linger too long when he hugged my mom, how he'd get quiet when I walked into a room like he was hiding something. I decided I needed proof. If I was going to protect my mom, I had to know what Mark was up to. I started sneaking around when he wasn't home, checking places I wasn't supposed to go. One day, while he was at the store, I jimmied the lock on his desk drawer with a paperclip. Inside, I found a stack of papers, bank statements, mostly. My mom's name wasn't on any of them, even though she told me they shared accounts. There was also a life insurance policy with my mom's name on it, and Mark was the beneficiary. My stomach churned. I took pictures with a disposable camera I bought with my burger-flipping money, then put everything back exactly how I found it. The more I dug, the more paranoid I got. I started noticing Mark's habits, like how he'd always take his phone outside to talk, even in the rain. Or how he'd lock his bedroom door when he left the house, even if my mom was home. I couldn't tell her what I'd heard yet. I didn't have enough to go on, and I was afraid she wouldn't believe me. She was so worn down by his rules, always walking on eggshells. I didn't want to scare her without something solid. At school, I started slipping. I was so focused on Mark that I couldn't concentrate. My grades dropped, and my teachers started asking if everything was okay at home. I just shrugged and say I was fine, but I wasn't. I felt like I was carrying this huge secret and it was eating me alive. My friends noticed I was quieter, but I couldn't tell them the truth. How do you explain that your stepdad's plotting something and you're trying to figure it out without getting caught? One night I got careless. I was snooping in the garage, looking through Mark's toolbox for anything suspicious when he came home early. I barely ducked behind a stack of boxes before he walked in. He didn't see me, but he stood there for a long time like he sensed something was off. My heart was pounding so loud I thought he'd hear it. After he left, I swore I'd be more careful, but I couldn't stop. I had to know what he was planning. Then came the first big twist. I was at work, wiping down tables during a slow shift when one of my coworkers mentioned she'd seen Mark at a coffee shop downtown. She thought it was weird because he was with a woman who wasn't my mom and they looked cozy. My blood ran cold. Was he cheating? Was that what the phone call was about? I thanked her for telling me and spent the rest of my shift trying not to cry. When I got home, I watched Mark and my mom at dinner. He was acting normal, joking about some TV show, but I could barely look at him. I knew I had to find out who that woman was. Update 2, things get messy, eh? I started tailing Mark when I could. It wasn't easy, I didn't have a car, and I had to be sneaky so he wouldn't notice. I'd borrow a friend's bike and follow him after he left the house, staying far enough back to blend in. One Saturday, I saw him pull into a diner on the edge of town. I hid behind a dumpster and watched through the window. Sure enough, there was a woman with him. She was younger than my mom, with sharp cheekbones and a laugh that carried across the parking lot. They weren't touching, but the way he leaned toward her made my skin crawl. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I snapped a few blurry photos with my disposable camera. When I got the film developed, I felt like throwing up. One picture showed Mark handing her an envelope and she looked way too happy about it. Was he paying her? For what? My mind went to dark places. Was she part of his plan for my mom? I started carrying the photos in my journal, tucked under the floorboard with my other secrets. I was so focused on Mark that I didn't notice how much it was affecting me. I was barely sleeping, jumping at every noise in the house. I'd hide food in my room because I was too scared to ask for anything from the fridge. My job was the only thing keeping me sane, but even there, I was messing up orders and snapping at customers. My manager pulled me aside and said I needed to get it together or I'd be out of a job. I nodded, but inside I was falling apart. Then came another twist. One day, I came home from school and found my room trashed. My clothes were on the floor, my desk drawers were open, and the floorboard in my closet was pried up. My journal was gone. I knew it was Mark. He'd figured out I was onto him. I sat on my bed, shaking, realizing how much he was. That journal had everything, the phone call, the bank statements, the diner photos. If he read it, he'd know I was doing. I waited for him to confront me, but he didn't. He just started acting weirder. He'd stare at me across the dinner table, smirking like he knew he'd won. I decided I had to confront him before he could do whatever he was planning. I didn't have my journal anymore, but I still had my photos and the memory of that phone call. I waited until my mom was at a friend's house, then cornered Mark in the living room. I told him I knew about the woman at the diner, about the insurance policy. I said I'd go to the police if he didn't leave us alone. My voice shook, but I held my ground. He didn't yell or deny it. He just smiled and said I was a nosy little kid who didn't know what I was talking about. I realized then that I'd misread him again. He wasn't scared of me. He was dangerous. That night, I packed a bag and hid it under my bed. I didn't know where I'd go, but I knew I couldn't stay. I started spending more time at the library, trying to figure out my next move. I found a women's shelter online that said they helped families in crisis. I called them, my voice barely a whisper, and they said I could come if things got bad. It felt like a betrayal to my mom, but I was terrified for both of us. Final update, the final twist, and what happened next. I didn't run away that week, but I wanted to. I was still watching Mark, trying to figure out what he'd do next. He was acting like everything was fine, but I could tell he was planning something. He'd leave the house more often, sometimes coming home late with a smug look on his face. I kept my photos hidden in my wallet now, too scared to leave them anywhere he could find them. Then, one night, the biggest twist of all hit me like a freight train. I was at the library using their computer to research the shelters when I got a call from my mom. She was sobbing, barely able to speak. She'd found something in Mark's office, a folder with fake divorce papers. They weren't for a real divorce, they were forged with her signature, saying she'd given up custody of me years ago. But that wasn't even the worst part. There was also medical records, fake ones, claiming she'd had a hysterectomy, meaning she couldn't have more kids. It was all part of his plan to isolate her, to make her think she had no one but him. I rushed home, my heart racing. When I got there, my mom was sitting at the kitchen table, the papers spread out in front of her. For the first time in years, she looked angry instead of scared. She told me she'd confronted Mark and he'd admitted everything. The woman at the diner was a lawyer he'd hired to draw up the documents. The phone call I'd overheard was him talking to her about tying up loose ends. He'd been trying to push me out so he could trap my mom in a marriage where she felt like she had no choice but to stay. My mom and I left that night. We didn't take much, just a few bags of clothes and the papers as proof of what he'd done. We went to the women's shelter I'd found and they took us in. It was cramped and the food was basic, but I felt safer there than I'd ever felt in Mark's house. The shelter helped us get a lawyer, a real one this time, one who said we could file for a restraining order and press charges against Mark for fraud and emotional abuse. My mom was hesitant, but I told her we had to do it not just for us but so he couldn't hurt anyone else. The legal process was slow and draining. Mark tried to spin it, saying we were lying to get his money, but the forged papers were his undoing. The lawyer he'd hired turned on him, and the police found more evidence in his office, emails, bank records, even a draft of a fake will that left everything to him. He was arrested, and we got a permanent restraining order. We're still at the shelter, but we're starting over. My mom got a job at a local bakery, and I'm back at my fast food gig, saving up for community college. We're sharing a tiny room, but we talk every night, rebuilding what Mark tried to break. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in years, I feel like we're a team again. Looking back, I realize how strong I was even when I felt like I was breaking. I kept going, kept digging, kept fighting for my mom and me. The hardest part was feeling so alone, but I learned that asking for help isn't weakness, it's survival. If you're reading this and you're stuck in something like this, don't give up. Keep fighting, keep looking for a way out. You're stronger than you know.